Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're taking a look at AI, specifically the ethical considerations for using it in research. It's a topic with, well, huge implications, and thankfully we have Jörg-Owe's essay to help us navigate this complex landscape.
It really is fascinating how AI is becoming so central to research in so many different fields. And as Schneepat points out, that growing role comes with a responsibility to make sure we're using it ethically.
Exactly. Schneepat uses the term ethical AI in research, but what does that look like in practice? What are we actually talking about here?
Well, at its core, it's about making sure that our values, our ethical standards, are baked into how we develop and use AI. Schneepat really stresses that AI's impact depends entirely on how we choose to design it and put it to work.
So let's break down some of Schneepat's key points. He puts a lot of emphasis on fairness and eliminating bias. Why is that so crucial, particularly in research?
Well, you have to think about it this way. AI systems learn from the data they're trained on. If that data is skewed in some way, or if it reflects existing societal biases, the AI can end up amplifying those biases. And that leads to, well, inaccurate or unfair results. Schneepat really highlights the need for what he calls bias mitigation.
Bias mitigation. Okay, that sounds pretty technical. What does that involve?
It's a multifaceted approach. Schneepat suggests that we need to very carefully select diverse and representative data to train these AI systems on. And it's also vital to regularly audit the algorithms for any signs of bias. There are specialized tools and techniques you can use to detect patterns that might suggest unfair outcomes.
So it's not just about fixing the data itself. It's about making sure the AI, so to speak, isn't developing any biases of its own.
Absolutely. And on top of that, Schneepat stresses the importance of transparency. We need to be able to understand how these algorithms are making decisions. If we can't understand why an AI is reaching a particular conclusion, it becomes very difficult to trust its findings, especially in research.
Transparency makes a lot of sense. But I can imagine that gets tricky with some of the more complex AI systems out there.
It certainly does. Schneepat acknowledges that achieving complete transparency may not always be possible, especially with these really intricate AI systems. But he argues that we should aim for as much transparency as we can. That might mean developing tools that help researchers understand the decision-making process, or even creating simplified explanations for, well, those of us who aren't AI experts.
Right, because not everyone has a PhD in machine learning. Which brings up another key point from Schneepat's essay, explainability. It's not enough to just know what an AI decides. We need to know why. Why is that so important, especially in a research context?
Well, in research, the ability to validate and scrutinize findings is crucial. If we don't understand the reasoning behind an AI's recommendations or conclusions, it's hard to fully trust the results.
Okay, so far we've got fairness, transparency, and explainability. Now, Schneepat also dives into another critical issue, data privacy. With all this data being used to train AI, how do we make sure people's personal information is protected, especially when we're talking about sensitive research areas?
Schneepat dedicates a significant portion of his essay to data privacy, and for good reason. He really emphasizes the need for robust data protection measures, adhering to privacy laws and ethical data management practices. That includes getting informed consent from individuals, minimizing the amount of data collected in the first place, and anonymizing data whenever possible.
Those steps sound pretty straightforward. But what happens if those principles are ignored? What are the potential consequences?
Well, Schneepat warns that neglecting data privacy can have pretty serious consequences. It erodes public trust in research, and it can actually perpetuate social inequalities. Certain groups might be disproportionately affected by privacy breaches or misuse of data, and that can lead to further marginalization.
So it sounds like Schneepat is arguing for a very cautious and deliberate approach to incorporating AI into research. It's all about finding that balance between embracing the power of this technology while ensuring it doesn't compromise our values.
That's a great way to put it. Schneepat sees the immense potential of AI to advance research, but he emphasizes that those ethical considerations need to be front and center. We have to move forward thoughtfully and carefully.
So we've covered some crucial ethical principles and potential risks. But how do we actually put these principles into practice? What concrete steps can researchers and developers take to ensure they're using AI ethically?
Well, that's what we'll be digging into next. Schneepat offers a number of practical recommendations and strategies for navigating the ethical landscape of AI in research.
Sounds like we have a lot more to unpack.
One of the things that really struck me in Schneepat's essay is this emphasis on collaboration. He argues that ethical AI isn't something that researchers can just tackle in isolation. It needs a multidisciplinary approach.
So it's not just about computer scientists figuring this out on their own.
Exactly. You need ethicists, social scientists, legal experts, a whole range of perspectives to really anticipate how AI is going to impact society as a whole.
It's about ensuring that AI research doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Precisely. And building on that, Schneepat stresses the importance of public engagement. It's about having these open discussions about AI, getting feedback from the communities that will be most impacted by this research.
That makes a lot of sense. People are more likely to trust something if they feel like they've been part of the conversation from the beginning.
Absolutely. Building that public trust is essential, and Schneepat really hammers that home. He also points to the need for ongoing education and training. It's not just about setting some rules and saying, okay, we're done. It's about building a real culture of ethical AI.
So everyone involved needs to understand not just the how-tos, but also the why-tos, right?
Exactly. Researchers, developers, and the general public, everyone needs to be equipped to navigate these complexities. Schneepat is urging us to go beyond just acknowledging the ethical concerns and start developing actual solutions.
He's not just pointing out the problems. He wants to help us find a way forward. So what are some of those concrete solutions that Schneepat proposes?
Well, we've already touched on the importance of diverse data sets. Schneepat really doubles down on this point. If you want to create AI systems that work for everyone, you need to train them on data that represents everyone.
Seems pretty intuitive, but I imagine it's harder to put that into practice than it sounds.
It can be, especially in really specialized research fields where that data might be scarce or hard to come by. But Schneepat argues that it's a goal we need to be striving for. He also advocates for something called algorithmic auditing.
Algorithmic auditing. That sounds kind of intense. What does that involve?
Basically, it's a way to check for hidden biases in algorithms. There are all sorts of techniques involved, but essentially you're using specialized tools to examine the algorithm's decision-making process, trying to identify any patterns that might indicate unfair or discriminatory outcomes.
So it's like a quality control check for your AI, making sure it's staying on the ethical track.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And these audits need to be done regularly throughout the AI's life cycle, not just at the beginning. AI systems are always learning and evolving, so it's crucial to make sure they're not picking up biases along the way.
And Schneepat also talks about ways to make these complex AI systems more transparent, right? He calls it explainability.
Yes, he devotes a whole section to that. He argues that while complete transparency might not always be feasible, especially with these more intricate AI systems, we need to be aiming for as much transparency as we can.
But how do you make something that's essentially a black box transparent? How do you open that up?
There are a few different approaches. One is developing tools that let researchers see the key factors that are influencing the AI's decisions. Another approach is focusing on creating simplified explanations that can be shared with non-experts, just making the process more accessible.
So even if we can't see every single gear turning inside the AI system, we can at least get a better sense of how it's working and why it's making the decisions it's making.
Right. And that understanding is so important for building trust and ensuring accountability. Now, going back to data privacy for a minute, it's another area where Schneepat offers some very specific recommendations.
Okay, how do we protect people's privacy when so much of AI research hinges on data? What does Schneepat suggest?
Well, he emphasizes the need for clear data governance frameworks. These frameworks lay out who has access to the data, how it can be used, what measures are in place to keep it confidential.
So it's not just about good intentions, it's about having solid policies and procedures in place.
Exactly. He also really stresses data minimization. That means collecting only the data that's absolutely necessary for the research. Because the less data you have, the less there is to potentially compromise.
That's a good reminder. I think we often collect way more data than we actually need.
Right. And then another key recommendation from Schneepat is anonymization. That's basically removing any information that could be used to identify specific individuals from the data set. This helps minimize the risk of privacy violations.
Okay, so we've got data governance frameworks, data minimization, and anonymization. Those all seem like really important steps, but Schneepat doesn't stop there, does he? He also talks about something called privacy-preserving machine learning. What is that all about?
It's a really fascinating, rapidly developing area of research. Essentially, it's about developing techniques that allow AI systems to learn from data without actually having to access the raw data itself.
Wait, that sounds almost impossible. How can an AI learn from data it can't see?
There are a few different approaches. One that Schneepat highlights is called federated learning. Imagine this. The AI model is being trained on data that's distributed across multiple devices or servers. The data never actually leaves its original source, but the AI can still learn from it.
So it's like the AI gets the knowledge without needing to see the actual data itself.
Exactly. It's like learning from the shadows, not the object itself. And this approach greatly reduces the risk of data breaches and privacy violations. Schnepphat sees this as a really promising way to mitigate privacy risks in AI research.
It sounds like there's a lot of exciting work being done to address these ethical challenges. But I imagine Schnepphat would be the first to say that there's still a long way to go.
You're right. He acknowledges that ethical AI in research is an ongoing process, not a one-time fix. AI technology is constantly evolving at a rapid pace, so we need to be constantly reevaluating our ethical frameworks and developing new safeguards.
So it's not just about building ethical AI systems today. It's about creating a future where AI research is always being conducted ethically.
Exactly. And Schnepphat makes it clear that the responsibility for ethical AI doesn't rest solely on the shoulders of researchers and developers. It requires a much broader societal effort.
So who else needs to be involved in this conversation?
He really stresses the need for policymakers, industry leaders, and even the public to all play a role in shaping the ethical landscape of AI research.
Okay, so it's a team effort. But what can ordinary people do? I'm not a scientist or a politician, so how can I contribute to ethical AI?
Schnepphat believes that everyone can contribute by simply staying informed about AI and its potential implications. Engaging in public discourse about these ethical concerns is crucial, and we can demand responsible development from the companies and institutions that are creating these technologies.
So it's about using our voices, asking questions, making sure that ethics is at the forefront of the AI conversation.
Precisely. Schnepphat's work really emphasizes that the future of AI isn't predetermined. We all have a role to play in shaping that future in a way that benefits humanity and aligns with our values.
This has been a really insightful look at the ethical considerations surrounding AI in research. We've explored some of the key challenges, and we've discussed some potential solutions. But before we wrap up, I want to touch on Schnepphat's perspective on the long-term societal impact of AI.
That's a great point. It's not enough to just focus on the immediate ethical concerns. We need to be thinking about those ripple effects of AI research. How might it shape our world in the years and decades to come?
Can you give us an example? What kind of long-term impacts are we talking about?
Well, one concern is the potential for AI to actually exacerbate existing social inequalities. If the development and deployment of AI is primarily driven by a small, elite group, it could further concentrate power and resources, leaving a lot of people behind.
So it's crucial to make sure that AI research and development is inclusive and benefits all of society, not just a select few.
Exactly. Schnepphat also brings up the potential impact of AI on the workforce. As AI systems become more and more capable, they may be able to automate many tasks that are currently being done by humans, and that could lead to significant job displacement in certain sectors.
That's a valid concern. We're already seeing AI and automation making inroads in some industries, and it's likely to become much more widespread.
Right. And Schnepphat doesn't offer any easy answers to these complex questions, but he does encourage us to start grappling with them now. We need to be thinking ahead, anticipating the potential disruptions that AI might bring, and developing strategies to mitigate those disruptions.
So it's not just about preventing AI from doing harm, but also about making sure it's used to create a better future for everyone.
Absolutely. This is going to require careful planning, thoughtful regulation, and a real commitment to making sure that AI development is aligned with human values and societal needs.
This has been quite a deep dive into some pretty weighty topics. We've explored bias, privacy, the potential for AI to exacerbate inequality, the impact on the workforce. It's a lot to process. But does Schnepphat leave us with any sense of hope amid all of these challenges?
He does. Schnepphat firmly believes that we can harness the power of AI for good. We can create a future where it benefits all of humanity, but it requires us to actively engage in these ethical debates. We need to develop strong safeguards, and we need to work together to shape the direction of AI development. You know, one thing that Schnepphat really drives home is that we need to make sure AI research benefits everyone in society and doesn't just make things worse for certain groups.
Yeah, that's really important. We've already talked about how AI can potentially perpetuate biases if we're not careful. But Schnepphat also brings up the economic implications, right? Like how AI might impact jobs and the workforce as a whole.
Absolutely. He points out that as AI becomes more capable, there's a real possibility that it could automate a lot of the tasks that humans are currently doing. And that could have a significant impact on the job market, particularly in certain sectors.
Right, we're already seeing some of that happening.
Yeah.
And it's probably only going to become more widespread as AI technology advances.
Right, and I think Schneeppert acknowledges that there aren't any easy answers here, but he encourages us to start having these difficult conversations now. Like, we need to try to anticipate those potential disruptions and figure out strategies to mitigate them.
So it's not just about preventing AI from doing harm, it's also about making sure it's used to actually create a better future for everyone.
Exactly. And that's going to require some careful planning, some thoughtful regulation, and a real commitment to making sure that AI development is aligned with human values.
This has been a pretty intense deep dive, I have to say. We've covered a lot of ground, from the potential biases to the privacy concerns, the impact on the workforce, and the potential for exacerbating inequality. It's a lot to process, to be honest. But does Schneeppert, does he offer us any sense of hope amidst all these challenges?
He does. Schneeppert genuinely believes that we can harness the power of AI for good. We can create a future where it benefits all of humanity. But it's going to require all of us to actively engage in these ethical debates, to develop strong safeguards, and to really work together to steer AI in the right direction.
So we've talked a lot about the ethical landscape of AI research, the potential pitfalls, and some possible solutions. But before we wrap things up completely, I want to go back to the big picture for a minute. I want to talk about why this matters, why this should matter to all of us, even if we're not directly involved in AI research.
That's a really good point. One of the most important things that Schneeppert emphasizes is that AI isn't just a technological issue, it's a societal issue. The decisions we make about how we develop and use AI are going to have profound, lasting impacts on our world.
So even if we're not the ones writing the code, we all have a stake in this, right?
Absolutely. And as AI becomes more and more integrated into our lives, it's really crucial for everyone to understand both the benefits and the risks. We need to be having these informed discussions about how to ensure responsible development.
We've talked a lot about the need for fairness, transparency, and privacy in AI research. Schneeppert argues that these aren't just nice-to-haves. These are absolutely fundamental for building trust in AI and ensuring that it's used to create a more just and equitable world.
And he also puts a lot of emphasis on collaboration. Ethical AI isn't something that a small group of experts can achieve in a vacuum. It requires this multi-stakeholder approach, bringing together researchers, developers, policymakers, industry leaders, and the general public to figure out shared values and guidelines.
It's not just about having the right technology. It's about having the right conversations, having the right partnerships.
Exactly. I see Schneeppert's work as this call to action, urging all of us to step up and really play our part in shaping this future of AI.
And that future is still very much unwritten. It really is up to us to decide what role AI will play in our lives and in the world we want to create.
Schneeppert's essay really gives us a valuable framework to navigate these ethical challenges. And it offers a lot of practical recommendations for how we can move forward responsibly. It's a really vital contribution to this incredibly important conversation.
So where does that leave us? What's the one key takeaway that our listeners should walk away with from Jörg-Owe Schneeppert's work?
I think Schneeppert's biggest point is that as AI becomes more powerful, the ethical stakes just keep getting higher. It's really on all of us to engage with these questions, to really think about them, and to demand responsible development of this technology.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in all the cool things that AI can do, but we have to keep those potential downsides in mind.
Exactly. And Schneeppert reminds us that AI is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. It's our responsibility to make sure it's used ethically and that the benefits are shared widely.
Well, we've covered a lot today. We talked about fairness, transparency, privacy, collaboration, all these crucial pieces.
Yeah.
But I think it ultimately all comes back to our values, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Schneeppert makes a really strong argument that we need to be very clear about the values that we're embedding into our AI systems. Do we want AI that promotes equality? AI that respects human dignity and autonomy?
Yeah.
AI that contributes to the common good?
Those are some really big questions, and I don't think there's any one easy answer.
No, there isn't. But these are the kinds of questions we need to wrestle with. The future of AI isn't fixed. It's up to us to shape it in a way that aligns with our values and our hopes for the future.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into ethical AI in research. I hope you found this exploration as thought-provoking as we did.
These issues are complex, but they're also incredibly important. The choices we make about AI today will have a ripple effect for years to come.
So we encourage you to learn more about Jörg-Owe work, to think critically about how AI is being used, and to get involved in the conversation.
Ask tough questions, demand answers, and make your voice heard. The future of AI really is in our hands.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.